Awesome. I'm here with Eliza Blank, founder and CEO of the Sill. Thanks for being here, Eliza.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, we're matching. It's
I
gonna be
know.
a good day. Yeah, we got our brown plant colors on. Would love to learn a little bit more about you and the Sill for those that don't know what the Sill is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to describe the Sill as a modern plant brand. And what makes it modern in part is that we are direct to consumer. So you can find us at thesill.com and you can shop for plants there, all sorts of house plants, and have them delivered direct to your doorstep. And we complement that with a lot of education and community and content. But we do have brick and mortar stores, so plant dedicated stores, which really didn't exist before the Sill in any meaningful way. And we have them in New York and LA and San Francisco and soon to be other markets, which we're super excited about. But our aim is to connect people with plants and really bridge the gap between plants and people, because what we always say is that plants make people happy.
Yeah, they do. As I was telling my girlfriend about you guys, I was like, they're the Warby Parker for
Yeah,
plants.
yeah, yeah.
Um, there's more and more companies that are doing the omni-channel thing with the retail and the online direct to
Mhm.
consumer. I'm curious how the Sill began. We were just talking a little bit before this, and you said you've been at it for 8 years. So
Yeah,
where was the plant? Where was the Sill when you started, and how did you get going, and how
yeah.
you landed where you are today?
It's been a journey. So I started the company when I was 26 years old. I had about 5 years of professional experience. I started my career in brand strategy. I worked at an agency, and then I worked in the CPG space in the brand marketing in a brand marketing role. And that company actually was a startup, and so that's really where I learned really what it was going to take to run my own business. I think had I had more confidence at the age of 21, I probably would have jumped right in, because in fact, I had the initial idea for the Sill right out of school. But I also knew that I didn't know enough. And so, I give myself credit that I did get a job, and I started working in a few different roles and capacities and learned a ton. And as luck would have it, I was in these positions that taught me a lot about how to operationalize big ideas. And so I started the Sill at 26. The initial idea for the Sill was always very simple. It was, how do you modernize the consumer garden center idea, which is to say that, often we grow up, not in big cities, but in areas where you can get in your car and drive to an independent garden center and shop for plants with, family businesses, who are often experts in plants themselves and can kind of guide you through the process. And that's how I grew up. So my mother, big gardener, houseplant enthusiast. And so I spent a lot of time with her doing, just these things, going to garden centers, shopping for plants, gardening, both inside and out. But when I got to the city as an adult and went to school and got into my first apartment, I realized that those resources no longer existed for me. I had no car, and then there was no easy access to a garden center. And so I found myself buying plants, at the grocery store or at the bodega, which is, something that we have in New York, and, Home Depot for that matter, taking things home on the subway and just creating, this mess in my apartment. And oftentimes I was sort of misguided into buying plants that I thought looked beautiful, but weren't actually going to survive in a New York City apartment with windows that faced a brick wall. So that's kind of when the light bulb went off that this was a real opportunity to actually recreate or create for the first time a consumer brand dedicated to educating people who often lived in urban areas about plants and how to incorporate them into your life. And what excited me about it, which I think is the common thread between us, is they're so inherently good for us, right? I really believed that in bringing plants to people, not only were we making them happier, but we're making them healthier. And we're doing that because plants are literally making you healthier, but they also help guide you to a more healthy lifestyle.
Super cool. So many places to jump off from there. I'm almost tempted to ask you for a tour of your apartment or house to see what kind of plants
You
you
can't
have.
see my plants, but they're literally all around me.
I see some aromatherapy you missed.
I have a humidifier going
Yeah,
because
guys. Yeah, I saw that.
it's dry here, and my plants, I have anthuriums and orchids, and I'm looking literally like right next to me. So yeah, I have a lot of plants.
Yeah, I actually had a short stint at the Wonderful Company, which owns Teleflora.
Yeah.
You know, flowers, direct to consumer flowers. And I'm thinking, like, at a high level, why did it take so long for us to take something like plants online? Like, did the whole direct to consumer flower revolution start before plants, like 1-800-Flowers, Teleflora, a lot of Bloom Nation, a lot of these companies? And
yeah,
was that at all an inspiration into starting your business, or were you looking more at the Warby Parkers of the world and the Caspers, kind of that, and or just bringing those two things together?
Yeah, no, great question. So yes, flowers made it online first. In the same sense that, you know, there's always been, you know, your local florist. You know, the concept of a florist that's in your neighborhood is not new. What was always missing was a plant store. And oftentimes florists would have plants, but they'd be like, you know, in the back corner. Florists aren't always educated about houseplants, so they wouldn't know how to educate you as a consumer about the care. And so part of the inspiration was that I did see momentum happening in the flower space, in that, you know, you had your sort of internet 1.0 flower companies like 1-800 or like Teleflora, and then you're getting sort of the second generation, like the Books and Urban Stems and Bloom Nation and Bloom That, and kind of these amazing next generation. But in all of it, plants were always left out. And it's actually a very different consumer, because oftentimes flowers are used as gifts. You're usually giving flowers to someone else for a special occasion. Maybe it's a birthday, anniversary, whatever. Whereas plants are really purchased for yourself. And they're more a staple in the home. It's a little bit more of home decor versus gifting. And so, you know, I just saw it as an opportunity of, if you can take things like flowers online, it's not logistically more complicated than that, then certainly you can make space for plants. And I think the reason why plants hadn't been thought of before is that a lot of the plant companies were just stuck in the past. They were, you know, like I said, often, you know, family owned, operated independent garden centers, probably third, fourth, fifth generation, and just hadn't been thinking about the online sphere yet.
Thinking about even like further back the history, how much do you know about like when people and folks started to even have plants in the house?
Oh, so thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I mean, pretty much as soon as people lived inside, they had decorative ornamental plants. You can date this back to all ancient civilizations. So, you know, plants, house plants as a concept is not new. And then, of course, plants predate human existence. And there's this concept called biophilia, which suggests that people are actually inherently wired to want to be in and around nature. And that's beautiful. I mean, that actually means that I don't have to market plants. People naturally want to be around plants, but they do need to know, you know, what plants, how do I take care of them? How am I going to get them? What are they going to look like? And so we're just sort of the conduit.
Super cool. As you started the Sill, you know, what was the initial product and how did you know it was working? Was it just you know, going door to door selling plants? Did you start with a website? What did that look like?
It was almost that. So I did have a website, but you could only shop on the website if you live near me. So it was literally like a website that was like, hey, if you're in, you know, 10011, my zip code, or, you know, if that was my zip code at the time, you can shop here and I'm going to knock on your door and hand you your product. So it was incredibly, you know, we talk about MVPs in tech, right? Your minimal viable product. It was as MVP as it got. And it was, you know, it was basic, but, you know, it gave me a platform to say like, hey, look, I'm doing this. Here's a brand that exists. And the novelty of it caught on right away. And because I had started in and around the same time as other platforms like Instagram, I was able to start to tell people about my business. And a lot of media outlets took notice. And so a lot of my early traction was actually because I got a lot of PR and press, and just people were excited that this new concept existed and nobody had ever really thought of it before.
So you went from this, you know, you had a website that was stuck or married to a specific area because that was you.
Yeah.
And from there, you started a couple more locations and kind of started to open it up. How did you decide to get into the retail world as opposed to just keeping it direct to consumer and e-commerce?
So the first 5 years of the business were the most experimental, and I did the website. I also had sort of a corporate sales arm of the business where we would go to offices actually and outfit the whole space with plants and then take care of the plants. And we were in all the big offices around New York City. We would do plants in Google's office and Twitter's office and in a number of WeWork offices. And it was a big part of the business for a number of years. But my love and passion was always going direct to consumer and not trying to sell into other businesses. That's what you're doing. And it's a very different business model. And so at some point I had to make a decision. Am I going to go the B2B route or am I going to go B2C? And my heart was always with the consumer, the direct consumer. And so we ended up shutting down the services business and not pivoting because we always had the consumer business, but being able to lean harder into that. And that was around when I opened my first storefront.
And now, fast forward to 2021.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of it, still in the pandemic. People, I've ordered a mattress. I've ordered some stuff for the house.
People will order everything now.
Yeah. And things are backed up too. Like demand for those types of products has boomed.
Yeah.
On the side of like getting people delivering houseplants, what kind of considerations do you have to have on that front in order to make sure that these things get delivered safely? Because it's not just an Amazon package where, there needs to be a certain level of care in terms of getting these things to different people. What does that look like?
Yeah. And, it's a good point because I would say 2020 was incredibly challenging for us in a way that we hadn't experienced before, not because of, of course, COVID, right? We actually had to close stores and we weren't immune to the hardships of COVID. But for us, it was actually that the carriers were so backed up. We can ship a plant, no problem. But we can't ship a plant if UPS is backed up and then our plant is being held in some facility, for an extra week before they can get to it. That's when we ran into problems because, it's a perishable product and it's winter. So we had to just be really incredibly transparent with our customers and say, hey, look, this is what's going on in the world. This may happen. It may result in an imperfect experience for you, but just know that we're going to make it right. And so, we sent out more replacements than we ever have before. We had to increase our customer experience team by hiring more people just so we could answer people's inquiries and let them know what was going on or help them track their packages. We've definitely gotten through, I think, a lot of the compression that we experienced around holiday, but it was definitely a challenge. So, which is just to say that every year in your business, you experience totally new challenges. And even though we didn't anticipate this one, doesn't mean that it's, not par for the course in some sense. So it's just another thing for us to kind of like learn from. And now if we get into the situation again, depending on what's, going on in the world, we'll know how to handle it.
And as you think about, I've talked to some founders that have been retail first, and I know you guys have done both. And because of the pandemic, they've seen that the business could not just survive, but can thrive being, and they can actually lower some of their costs by being direct to consumer first.
Yeah.
Has that been the case for the Sill, or are you guys continuing to double down on the retail expansion?
Yeah, we're doing both. We're excited about retail. And in fact, what I would say is the difference in sort of post-COVID, if we want to call it post, we're sort of in, but pre-COVID and post-COVID is that people go to our stores with a lot more intention. It's less likely that they're there just to like drop in and window shop and kind of like check things out. They're going because they actually want to buy. And so what we've noticed is we have a lot more opportunity to spend time with the customer who wants to purchase because we can only let in so many people at a time and because we're being, we're following all the safety precautions. So, on a weekend, you might have hundreds of customers who go into the store. You can only give 30 seconds of your time and attention to each of them, and you don't know which ones are there to actually purchase versus, ask questions or look around. Whereas now you almost can guarantee everyone who walks into the store has intent. And so you can spend, 10, 15, 20 minutes with them because they're the only ones in the store at the time. So we've actually found that our store sales have done incredibly well, even despite having to physically close for a number of months. So we're excited about stores. We still do the bulk of our business online, and there's obvious advantages to having an online business. And if we weren't set up to do online business, we would have very much suffered through COVID. But it was a good, healthy balance for us.
Super interesting. And then on the supply side, you think about like you being an plant person of one in the early days, and maybe a few, and now today, and your business has grown tremendously. How has your supply chain evolved? You guys ever foresee yourselves also vertically integrating and being on the supply side yourselves in terms of the plant, growing these plants so you can sell them?
We would never be fully vertically integrated. And the reason is because it takes different specialties to grow different types of plants. And it's a goal of ours to continue to offer real breadth of plants. And so, and because we want to support the industry, the industry needs our business. They're getting plenty of business right now because everybody's trying to buy plants. But a lot of the industry, the growers themselves, very much like independent garden centers, are family owned, operated, and multi-generational, and have incredible expertise in whatever it is they're growing. So we have wonderful relationships with the growers, and we want to support them. And there's really no need for us to go in and try and do what they're doing because they're already there and they're doing it well. What we can do is help them forecast, help them understand the customer, understand trends. So we work much more closely with them than I think other retailers have in the past, but it's a great relationship.
And as you think about the future of the Sill and where you guys are today, and building this approachable brand that has a strong emphasis also on like community. I know you guys do some memberships. Are you guys going to be limited to plants? Do you guys see yourselves getting into other parts of nature, like with a broader mission of connecting people back to nature? I can even see you guys, I don't know, getting into the food or CPG world. What else is in the pipeline, and what are you most excited about as you think about the brand's future?
Yeah. So we definitely have big ambitions. I can say that. And we've learned a lot from our customer and what they want from us. And I think we have a lot of license to expand. And so we are excited to do some of those things, but I'm not going to spoil it. But keep your eyes on us this year, because we'll start to sort of demonstrate what we're up to. And we're excited about that. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think being a plant parent, as we like to call them, is generally indicative of a type of lifestyle, not just one, many. But usually as part of that lifestyle, you're thinking about other ways to incorporate plants into your life, not just house plants, but plants show up in a lot of parts of our life, whether it's what we consume or what the products we use. And so I kind of think sky's the limit for the Sill.
And in that growth trajectory and process, thinking about the initial customer you had a couple of years ago and who the customer is today, sometimes you look at that the customer being like the early adopter, and then going up market to maybe someone who's a later customer for you. How do you think about that? Has the customer changed for the Sill, or are you primarily serving who you were serving a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I started the Sill for myself, right? So, consider a 26-year-old professional woman living in New York City. What's interesting about the last year is that we've seen a lot of people move around this country, and it'll be interesting to see how this continues to play out, with people spending more time at home, less time at the office, less time and energy commuting, and more time picking up hobbies like gardening. So, I think in that sense, we don't have to singularly focus on a professional woman who lives in the city. And certainly we have a much more diverse customer than that as we've grown up. And so, I think there's room to expand. We've seen a lot of men get into the category. I can say that with certainty, and we don't want to exclude men in any of this. So yeah, I would say we're definitely going broader than early days. And it's been interesting for me, I think in particular, to like start to remove myself from this idea that I'm the customer. So it's really forced me to have a really open mind about the products we launch, the campaigns we put out in the world, things like our tone of voice and the brand and things of that nature.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I'm fascinated by brand and messaging and positioning, and I think I heard you say that you're a brand person through and through.
Yeah.
As you change and evolve your customer, how do you think about changing and evolving the brand and the positioning? Is it the language that's changing? Is it the design? Is it both? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I often like to talk about how brands are like people, which means that they show up in different channels in different ways. Like I would have, the way that I engage and talk with you is going to be different than how I talk with my mother, but I'm still me. And so that sort of just shows how brands can show up differently on Instagram versus email versus online. And just like people, we all evolve. And so I'm not so precious about the Sill that I'm not willing to let it grow. No pun intended, but maybe. And so we've done that. I think we've allowed it to organically grow up with our customer, with our product line, with the world. And that's really what keeps us relevant, which, I think we've seen other brands hold more true to their original inception. And then they sort of fall out of favor because they're unwilling to be flexible.
Yeah, flexibility is definitely I think one of the most the key words of the times that we're in. We're seeing that with employers and employees and resiliency, all that. Eliza, I'm curious to switch gears a little bit and better understand you. And I find your journey interesting in terms of how you worked in CPG, how you worked in technology, how that got you into the world of entrepreneurship, but even like maybe going a little bit back into your you as a person. What did you think that you were going to do when you were like in high school? Like, did you think that you would be an entrepreneur starting a business? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a boss, which sounds ridiculous, but like I didn't even really know what that meant, but I knew that I wanted to be in charge. Like I was the kid with like my hand up in class, right? Like if you put me like on a team project, I was going to lead it. Like I definitely, now that I'm a mom, I have a 2-year-old. It's just wild to me how strong my 2-year-old's personality is. Like she is like a independent person with a personality, and like granted it may like change over time, nature versus nurture, but like she came out with a personality. And so I have now a lot of reason to believe that like I've always just been wired this way. So in a weird way, the Sill wasn't on my radar. I didn't know the word entrepreneurship in high school, but I think part of me was like, yeah, I want to be in charge of something important.
So interesting. And it sounds like that, you had that inside you as you went through college, went through your startups. Have there been any sort of habits or skill sets, disciplines that you've had to hone in? Like, it sounds like some of it, is natural and organic. And then there's other things that we have to like work for.
Yeah.
For example, for me, like I knew that I needed to be a little bit more disciplined with food in order for me to create that discipline and apply it to other parts of my life. It like created a system for me. And I'm curious whether you have anything like that you practiced over time and honed in.
I mean, so many things really, because, being in the position that we're in just requires so much mental resilience, but also just requires it's so much, right? I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but I think like the things that I've really needed to hone in on, in your own words, is actually this idea of to counter actually this like idea that I wanted to be in charge, this idea that I like knew anything at all, actually, and that I was right in any way. And so I think a lot of what I've come to learn over the past few years in particular is that I need to learn from everyone around me. I need to really embrace other points of view. I need to talk less and listen more. I think you come out guns blazing when you're young and you're like, I can do this and I can do anything. And, I know what I'm doing. Even though inside you're like, I don't know what I'm doing at all. But now I think we're, now that I'm more mature in the business and comfortable as a leader, I'm actually like the first person to be like, I have no idea. Or to say like, I'm wrong all the time. This may be one of those instances. So I think that's what I've had to get comfortable with, which I wasn't comfortable with before. So not exactly like your example that you just offered, but I think that's like what I've really worked on the most.
Super cool. No, I think we all have places where, kind of understanding what is our like hero trait or superpower can also be like our Achilles heel.
Yeah.
So being mindful of and self-aware enough to understand that. And it sounds like for you, it was like just being more open to listening and maybe delegating and not necessarily needing, which is hard as a founder and leader. You kind of want to do everything.
Yeah.
Switching gears a tiny bit to like thinking more about like self-care, preventative care, well-being. How have you approached that? Like, I think in many ways you can pitch the Sill as a, plants for wellness type company. And I think there's a huge trend towards that, which you also mentioned. How has your own sort of well-being journey played a role within your leadership and the Sill success?
Yeah, so absolutely right about the Sill being a wellness business. I think that's actually what's resonated so deeply with our customers is that they do think of plants as part of their wellness journey or self-care journey, that it's something that gives them wellness in the sense that, cleans the air you breathe, reduces stress and anxiety, boosts creativity and productivity. There's a lot of, hard facts around plants and wellness. But it also just gives you something to nurture and take care of and have a relationship with. And it forces you to slow down. And, I can't take care of my plants if I'm like on my phone, right? Like I actually have to like put my phone down, close my laptop, like be in the moment, like check in on my plants. And when you have, 50 plus plants like I do, it takes a second. So like, I'm carving out a couple hours on a weekend, every weekend to do that. And then I sort of like, fuss throughout the week too. So that's, it's always been sort of sort of a metaphor, I guess. The way that you take care of your plants is in a lot of ways the way that you take care of yourself. We say this a lot, like a good look at your plant is better than a good look in the mirror. Often because, if you're going through really stressful times, at least I've found this, but I know others have too, your plants typically suffer. So like if your plant is drooping of thirst, because you've neglected it, it's very likely that you're neglecting other things in your life, not just that plant. And so, so there's a lot of sort of like interesting lessons about wellness, not just the physical attributes of plants that give us wellness. And then as a founder, a lot of entrepreneurs actually put their wellness and self-care and all of that sort of as secondary. I think, I certainly did to some extent, but actually having a child, being pregnant and having a baby while running a business was the first time I really obviously prioritized my own health because it meant I was prioritizing my daughter's health. And then I just came to realize I can stop to eat lunch. The business isn't going to collapse because I eat lunch. And so a lot of those practices carried on, after my daughter was born, and certainly better for it.
So cool. I find the just in general, the timing that you had in terms of when you started the business, and then thinking about I just look at millennials and maybe the next generation as having almost maybe it's just in my circle, but almost having this newfound obsession with plants. And I guess some of that has been historic, but it's really interesting to see what media has done, what social media has done in terms of like making plants cool, and what your brand has done in that. So I think it's really awesome. As you zoom out and think about just what you're most excited about, as you think about whether it's the future of business and direct to consumer in wellness, or more broadly or more specifically in terms of the Sill and plants and connecting people to nature, what are you most excited about looking ahead?
I think I'm broadly speaking just really excited to see the diversity of businesses and the diversity of founders more than ever, right? You know, even when I started the business in 2012, there weren't a lot of founders that looked like me. You know, we just saw Bumble go public, number 21, 21st woman to take a company public. Like, we have a long way to go, but I think that's actually what I'm most excited about, is when I'm networking today and the types of people I'm meeting, it's more people like me than ever before. And I think that's going to bring a diversity of ideas and products that solve real problems. And that's a really exciting place to be. So that's, I think, what has me going right now.
I look forward to coming to the Sill going public party.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Amazing.
Cool.
Well, I'm so excited about everything that you guys have accomplished, and I'm
Thank you.
excited to see what you guys do in the coming months and years. And zooming out, I'm excited to see what other more diverse group of entrepreneurs accomplishes. I think that's been really exciting for us as well, like being in and around the people ops and HR world, is the focus on diversity, inclusion, belonging. So yeah, let's get more plants to the people.
Yeah.
And Eliza, thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday to chat. It's been really fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.